Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was a spy for the Rebel Alliance who crashed on Earth and has to stop the Empire from invading Earth. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The universe was screaming, not in a metaphorical sense, not in the quiet, soul-deep way poets on Alderaan once described the cosmic loneliness between stars. This was a literal, mechanical, ear-splitting shriek of stressed metal, protesting electrons, and the imminent, violent death of 1,000 different components at once. Red light bathed the cramped cockpit of the Hope's Whisper, flashing in a syncopated rhythm of doom that danced across Izuku Midoriya's sweat-slicked face. Main power failure imminent, aft shields offline, hyperdrive regulator, critical damage. Izuku's fingers flew across the control panel, a frantic but precise ballet of desperation. His flight suit, a standard-issue orange Rebel Alliance uniform, felt tight and suffocating, sticking to his skin. His green, untamable hair was plastered to his forehead. Outside the transparasteel viewport, the endless black was torn apart by strokes of searing green light, turbo-laser fire from the Imperial Arquitens-class cruiser, the Steel Talon, that had been hounding him for the last 3 parsecs. Come on, you rust bucket, just hold together a little longer," he muttered, his voice a low, rapid-fire stream of technical jargon and prayer. "Rerouting auxiliary power from the life support to the rear deflectors. It's only a 10% boost, but it might deflect a glancing shot, if the energy coupling doesn't melt first, which, given the last 3 diagnostics, it absolutely will." The Hope's Whisper, a heavily modified Corellian G9 rigger scout ship, was his home. He'd rebuilt her from a scrapyard wreck with a Bahan engineer named Kalen, learning every wire, every fuel line, every stubborn, cantankerous quirk of her personality. She was fast, she was tough, and right now, she was dying. A proximity alarm blared, a high-pitched wail that cut through the cacophony. 2 TIE/LN starfighters, their twin ion engines screaming like banshees, swarmed past his port side, peppering his ship with laser fire. The ship shuddered violently, and a shower of sparks erupted from a console to his right. The smell of ozone filled the air. Okay. New plan. His eyes, wide and frantic, darted to the small, cylindrical data spike strapped securely to the co-pilot's seat. That was everything. It contained the complete Imperial battle plans for their encroachment into Sector 7G, the so-called wild space. It held fleet movements, resource assessments of a dozen unsurveyed worlds, and most importantly, the construction schedule for a new regional command station. Getting that data to Alliance High Command could save billions of lives and halt the Empire's expansion for years. Failing was not an option. He'd been an analyst, a codebreaker. He was supposed to be in a quiet room on a hidden moon base, surrounded by datapads, not outrunning a command cruiser. But the agent who was supposed to make the pickup had been compromised. Izuku was the only one on station who knew the ship and the extraction route. He was the backup. The last resort. Codenamed Deku by a sarcastic Radian pilot who said he was more useful for his brains than his brawn, he'd always felt the name fit. He was unassuming, often overlooked. It was the perfect cover for a spy. It was less ideal for a hotshot pilot. Another blast rocked the ship, sending him lurching against his restraints. The lights flickered and died, plunging the cockpit into the terrifying, absolute darkness of space, illuminated only by the intermittent green flashes of death from his pursuers. The emergency power kicked in a second later, casting the interior in a ghostly red glow. Navigational computer offline. No! Izuku slammed a fist against the dashboard. The navicomputer was his only way out. A blind jump into hyperspace was suicide. You could fly into a star, a black hole, or the gravity well of a dead planet. But staying here was guaranteed execution. His mind raced, a torrent of calculations and possibilities. The Steel Talon is moving to cut off my planned trajectory to the rendezvous point. They know where I'm going. The ties are hurting me. Standard containment protocol. They don't want to destroy the ship. They want the data spike intact. That gives me a little time. Not much. His eyes fell on the manual astrogation charts, physical, flimsy printouts he kept for just such an emergency. It was archaic, a fool's errand. But it was his only chance. Pulling the ship into a sharp, bone-jarring spin to evade another volley of fire, he unstrapped the chart and spread it across his lap. His hands were shaking, but his mind was a razor's edge. He cross-referenced the last known star patterns on his sensor screen with the charts, his muttering intensifying. Okay, last known position, relative to the Azure Nebula. That means the uncharted territories are there. He pointed a trembling finger to a patch of near-empty space on the chart. Wild space. A place where hyperspace lanes were unstable and celestial bodies went unrecorded. The Empire avoided it for a reason, which made it the perfect place to hide. No known gravity wells, no recorded stellar phenomena. It's a shot in the dark, but it's a shot. He began punching in the coordinates manually, his fingers a blur. It was a complex, multi-stage calculation that Navidreds spent minutes on. He had seconds. The steel talon was moving into optimal tractor beam range. Warning, tractor beam lock. Almost there. The ship began to groan, a deep, resonant tremor as the invisible energy of the tractor beam began to grip it. Got it! He slammed the activation lever for the hyperdrive. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The ship continued to shudder, pulled inexorably toward the waiting belly of the Imperial cruiser. Then, with a sound like the fabric of reality being torn in two, the hyperdrive engaged. The stars outside the viewport did not streak into clean, crisp lines of light. They smeared, distorted, and bled into a chaotic vortex of violent blue and white. The Hope's whisper wasn't just jumping to light speed, it was being thrown. Izuku felt a gut-wrenching lurch, and the abused metal of his ship finally gave up. The main power core overloaded in a flash of white, and the universe, for him, went black. On the manicured grounds of the unforeseen simulation joint, the air was filled with the sounds of controlled chaos. Kirishima, secure the civilian! Yayorozu, we need a makeshift stretcher and a splint, now! Tenya Ida, Class 1 as representative, chopped the air with his hand, his voice a crisp bark of authority. Eijiro Kirishima, his skin hardened into a rugged crimson shell, grinned as he gently lifted a training dummy from a pile of rubble. You got it, Class Rep! This rescue stuff is so manly! It was supposed to be a standard rescue exercise. The ProHero 13, in their bulky, space-themed costume, had just finished explaining the importance of using their quirks to save, not to harm. Aizawa-sensei stood off to the side, his expression as bored and weary as ever, his eyes scanning his students with sharp, critical appraisal. The USJ was a marvel of HeroCourse engineering, a massive dome containing perfect simulations of a dozen different disaster scenarios. They were currently in the ruins zone, a convincing replica of a city devastated by a villain attack. Momo Yayorozu was already producing the requested medical supplies from her arm, a shimmer of light coalescing into sterile bandages and durable metal. Ida, the splint will need to be adjusted for a potential compound fracture. Excellent foresight, Yayorozu! Katsuki Bakugo scoffed from atop a shattered concrete pillar, his hands jammed in the pockets of his hero costume. TCH, playing doctor. Who cares? When are we gonna fight some real villains? He punctuated his sentence by setting off a small, crackling explosion in his palm, a puff of smoke smelling of burnt sugar. It was then that the sky broke. It began as a sound, a low, guttural roar that vibrated in their bones, completely drowning out the ambient noise of the simulation. Every head in Class 1A snapped upward. What was that? Ochako Uraraka asked, her eyes wide. Is that part of the exercise? High above, a new, terrible star had been born. A point of fire, brighter than the sun, was searing a path through the afternoon sky, leaving a thick, billowing trail of black smoke in its wake. It wasn't a meteor. It moved with a terrifying, unnatural purpose, falling with the velocity of a judgment. Everyone, get back! Aizawa's voice cut through their awe, sharp and commanding. His usual apathy was gone, replaced by a focused intensity. His capture weapon, the gray scarf around his neck, began to stir. 13 protective positions! The object grew larger, its shape becoming discernible. It was metal, angular, and clearly artificial. Flames licked its hull, which was pitted and scorched, with entire sections peeled back to reveal a glowing, sparking interior. It was a vehicle, something from beyond their world, and it was going to crash. It's headed right for the city. Izumi, no, Shido Todoroki, pointed out, his voice a calm, analytical monotone that betrayed the tension in his stance. But then, impossibly, the falling wreckage seemed to shift its trajectory. Even as it broke apart, shedding pieces of burning debris, its nose tilted slightly, agonizingly, away from the distant skyline of Muzutafu and toward the forested mountains that bordered the UA campus. It's trying to avoid the city, Uraraka whispered in disbelief. Whoever was inside was still fighting. With a final, deafening sonic boom that shattered the glass dome of the USJ, the fiery object screamed over their heads and slammed into the forest just beyond the facility's perimeter. The ground bucked like a living thing. A plume of earth, smoke, and shattered trees erupted into the sky, followed by a shockwave that flattened the weaker structures in the ruins zone. For a moment, there was only stunned silence, the ringing in their ears, and the sight of a column of black smoke rising into the otherwise peaceful blue sky. Bakugo was the first to move, a feral grin stretching across his face. Finally! Some real action! He blasted himself into the air, soaring towards the crash site. Bakugo, you idiot, get back here! Aizawa shouted, but it was too late. We have to go! Someone might be hurt! Kirishima exclaimed, hardening his arms as he started to run. One by one, the instincts of young heroes in training took over. Ida, despite his protestations about protocol, revved the engines in his calves. Todoroki created a path of ice to slide on. The rest of Class 1A followed, a chaotic, colorful stampede of teenagers running toward a danger they couldn't possibly comprehend. Aizawa sighed, a deep, world-weary sound. Problem children, the lot of them. He and 13 exchanged a look before giving chase, their duty to protect their students overriding all other protocols. The pain was a white-hot sun blooming behind Izuku's eyes. He tasted blood and ozone. The emergency restraints had snapped, throwing him across the cockpit. His left arm was definitely broken, and a dozen different cuts were bleeding freely through his torn flight suit. The Hope's whisper was silent for the first time since he bought her. It was a dead, final quiet that felt more terrifying than the screaming alarms. His first thought hazy through the concussion, the data spike. He pushed himself up, his body screaming in protest. The world tilted and spun. He saw the data spike, miraculously unharmed, lying on the floor plates near the shattered viewport. He crawled toward it, his vision swimming in and out of focus. His fingers closed around the cool, metallic cylinder. Mission objective secure. His second thought, where am I? Through the gaping hole where the viewport used to be, he saw trees. Impossibly green trees under a sky that was the wrong shade of blue. The air smelled of soil, pine, and burning fuel. He had no idea what planet this was, but it was alive. He had managed to divert the crash from the city he'd seen during his descent. Small victories. He could hear shouting outside. Multiple voices. He needed to get out, assess the situation, maybe find a place to hide and repair the ship's emergency beacon. The Empire would be coming. The Steel Talon would have tracked his hyperspace exit point. They would investigate this system. It was only a matter of time. Clutching the data spike to his chest, he limped to the emergency exit ramp. With a groan of protesting hydraulics, he managed to manually trigger the release. The ramp hissed down onto a bed of soft, alien moss and shattered wood. He stumbled out into the light, blinking against the brightness. He was in a massive crater of his own making. The Hope's whisper was a mangled wreck behind him, half buried in the earth. The forest was on fire in several places. And standing at the edge of the crater, staring at him with a mixture of awe, confusion, and hostility, was a crowd of teenagers in the most bizarre, brightly colored armor he had ever seen. One of them, a blond boy with spiky hair and red, grenade-like gauntlets, took a step forward. His expression was a predatory snarl. "Who the hell are you, extra?" he growled. Izuku's mind, trained for intelligence gathering and threat assessment, kicked into overdrive, overriding the pain. Multiple hostiles. Estimated 20 individuals. Highly varied costumes, suggesting specialized roles or abilities. The blonde one is aggressive, likely the point of attack. The tall one in blue armor seems to be a leader type. The girl with the pink cheeks looks concerned. Possible non-combatant? Their technology level is confusing. No visible energy weapons, but their attire is too advanced for a primitive society. He held up his free hand in a gesture of peace he hoped was universal. I don't want any trouble, he said, his voice raspy. The words came out in Galactic Basic Standard. He had no idea if they would understand. Apparently they did. Or at least, the sound of his voice was the only trigger the blonde one needed. Shut up and die! Bakugo roared, and his palms erupted in a blinding flash of light. A wave of concussive force and searing heat shot toward Izuku. Izuku's rebel training took over instantly. There was no time to think, only to react. He dropped and rolled, the explosion tearing through the space where he'd just been standing. The heat washed over his back, and the sound was deafening. He came up on one knee, his DH-17 blaster pistol, which had been holstered at his hip, now in his hand. He kept it pointed at the ground. He wouldn't fire on what might be civilians. Analysis. An explosive power emanating from his hands. Sweat-based? Nitroglycerin-like compound. The gauntlets seemed designed to focus the blast. High yield, but he seems to have excellent directional control. A short-range AoE attacker. Avoid close quarters. His brain was cataloging the information even as his body moved. He'd spent years sparring with Alliance commandos, learning hand-to-hand techniques from a dozen different species. He wasn't a frontline soldier, but he was far from helpless. Bakugo, stand down! We don't know if he's a villain! Ida commanded, but the blonde wasn't listening. He dodged it! He's not just some random pilot! Bakugo grinned, a wild, manic light in his eyes. He propelled himself forward with smaller, controlled explosions, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Izuku sidestepped, his movement fluid and economical. This wasn't a quirk. This was muscle memory honed in 100 high-stakes simulations. As Bakugo swung a wide right hook, aiming to detonate an explosion point-blank, Izuku ducked under the arm, pivoted on his heel, and used the boy's own momentum to spin him around, creating distance. His movements are powerful but predictable. He telegraphs his major attacks. Relies on overwhelming force. Before Bakugo could recover, a wave of ice, sharp and glistening, shot across the ground toward Izuku's feet. He saw it coming, a river of white originating from a boy with half-red, half-white hair. Izuku didn't try to stop it. He leapt onto the slick surface, using the lack of friction to slide gracefully away from the attack's path, never taking his eyes off his multiple opponents. Cryokinesis. A powerful ability with large-scale environmental effects. User is calm, tactical. A greater threat than the explosive one. He's so fast. Uraraka breathed, watching the strange boy evade two of the class's strongest members without seeming to break a sweat, despite his obvious injuries. Izuku's mind was a whirlwind of analysis, his trademark muttering finally spilling out, a low, intense whisper. Explosive quirk with high temperature output. Cryokinetic pyrokinetic hybrid. Judging by the differing hair color, and the faint steam rising from his left side, they call these abilities quirks. A biological power factor in over 80% of the population. If I'm extrapolating from this sample size, fascinating and terrifying. He saw the pink-cheeked girl running toward him from the side. Her hands were outstretched. A touch-based ability? Nullification? Disintegration? He didn't wait to find out. As she got close, he kicked off the ground in a short, sharp leap, planting his foot on the trunk of a half-fallen tree and flipping backward, landing in a low crouch 10 feet away. The students of 1A were stunned. This boy, who looked their age, was wounded, unarmed save for the strange pistol he refused to raise, and yet he was moving with a speed and precision that rivaled their teachers. He wasn't using a quirk, they would have been able to tell. This was all pure skill. Bakugo was incandescent with rage. Being evaded so easily was a blow to his pride. Stop dancing around, you damn nerd! He launched himself forward again, preparing his signature move. AP shot! He focused his explosion into a tight, armor-piercing beam. Izuku's eyes widened. He couldn't dodge that. It was too fast, too focused. He braced himself, raising his good arm to shield his face, the data spike held tight in the other. This was going to hurt. Suddenly, something long, gray, and fabric-like shot out from the edge of the crater. It moved with the speed of a striking snake, wrapping around Izuku's torso, arms, and legs in a tight, inescapable bind. It yanked him backward, lifting him off his feet and slamming him onto the soft earth, far away from Bakugo's blast. His blaster clattered from his grip. The data spike rolled a few feet away. Stunned and immobilized, Izuku looked up. Standing on the lip of the crater was a man with long, black hair, a tired expression, and eyes that glowed with a terrifying, ruby-red light. A strange, prickling sensation washed over Izuku, a feeling of emptiness. The man was flanked by the other teenagers, who now looked on with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "That's enough," Shota Aizawa said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. His binding weapon held Izuku fast. "Stand down, all of you. The threat is neutralized." He walked down into the crater, his glowing eyes never leaving Izuku. He kicked the DH-17 blaster away and picked up the data spike, examining it with a curious frown. Izuku struggled against the bonds, but they were impossibly strong. He looked at the man, at the students, at the burning remains of his ship, and at the alien sky above. He was alone, captured, and disarmed on a hostile, unknown world. He had failed his mission. The rebellion wouldn't know what happened to him. And the Empire was still coming. A shadow fell over him. A giant of a man, with a blinding smile and two distinct tufts of blonde hair that looked like antennae, loomed over him. The man's presence was overwhelming, radiating a power that felt like a star being born. "Well now," the man's voice boomed, deep and full of a strange, cheerful confidence that felt entirely out of place. "It seems we have a visitor. Young man, you have a lot of explaining to do, All Might." The symbol of peace had arrived, and for Izuku Midoriya, the spy from another galaxy, the real trouble was just beginning. The first thing Izuku became aware of was the cold. It was a sterile, processed chill that had nothing to do with the planet's climate, and everything to do with the room itself. The walls were a stark, seamless gray, the floor polished to a mirror shine, and the only furniture was a simple metal table and two chairs. He sat in one, his hands resting on the cool surface. His left arm was now encased in a surprisingly lightweight and comfortable sling, the sharp, grinding pain of the break reduced to a dull, persistent ache. A woman with a grandmotherly demeanor and a slightly unnerving syringe-shaped cane had seen to his injuries with a quirk that felt like a warm, cellular kiss, knitting bone and sealing cuts with an efficiency that would put any Alliance medpoc to shame. They had taken his flight suit, replacing it with a plain gray tracksuit that felt both too big and too small at the same time. Stripped of his uniform, his blaster, and the familiar weight of his gear, he felt exposed. He was no longer Lieutenant Midoriya of Alliance Intelligence. He was just a boy, lost and a long, long way from home. The hum of the overhead fluorescent lights was the only sound. A large, dark panel on one wall was undoubtedly a one-way mirror. He was being watched. He didn't need spy training to know that. He focused on his breathing, a calming technique taught to him by a Wookiee strategist. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. Center yourself. Analyze. Adapt. Survive. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and two figures entered. The first was the man from the crater, the one with the tired eyes and the strange binding weapon. He moved with a quiet, predatory grace, his expression a mask of profound apathy that somehow felt more threatening than the explosive boy's open rage. He took a position against the wall, arms crossed, a silent, brooding sentinel. The second figure was unexpected. It was a small, bipedal creature, perhaps a stoat or a weasel, with pristine white fur, intelligent black eyes, and a neat suit and tie. A noticeable scar ran over its right eye. It carried an air of unnerving intellect and authority. Species unknown. Mammalian. Likely possesses a high-level cognitive quirk. The true authority in the room, despite his size. Izuku's mind catalogued the observation automatically. The creature hopped onto the chair opposite him, its small feet barely reaching the edge. It folded its paws neatly on the table. "Good afternoon," it said, its voice calm and disarmingly polite. Am I a bear? A mouse? A dog? It matters not. I am Nizu, the principal of this institution, UA High School. Behind Nizu, a panel on the wall shimmered and dissolved into a holographic display. The giant of a man from the crash site appeared, now looking significantly less giant. He was seated in what looked like an office, and his projection flickered with a faint blue light. Despite the disembodied nature of the image, his presence still filled the room. And I am All Might. The hologram boomed, though the volume was moderated. Apologies for not being there in person. There is much to sort out after your dramatic arrival. This is my colleague, Shota Aizawa. Nizu added, gesturing with a paw toward the man by the wall. Aizawa grunted in acknowledgement, his gaze unwavering. 3 interrogators. The cynic, the intellectual, and the symbol. A classic intelligence pressure tactic. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. Now then, Nizu began, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. Let's start with the basics, shall we? Who are you? Where did you come from? And what, precisely, was that extraordinary display of evasive maneuvering and combat analysis we witnessed earlier? Your file, as you can imagine, is completely blank. Izuku took a deep breath. He had been running through this moment in his head since the binding cloth had wrapped around him. Denial was pointless. A lie would be detected by beings this perceptive. The truth was his only weapon, however insane it might sound. My name is Izuku Midoriya, he began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. He looked each of them in the eye, trying to project sincerity. I am a lieutenant in the Alliance to restore the Republic. And I am not from this planet. The room was silent for a long moment. All Might's holographic brow furrowed. Nizu's smile remained fixed. Aizawa, however, let out a short, humorless scoff. A space alien, Aizawa said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Of course. And this alliance of yours, is that the name of your villain organization? It's not a villain organization, Izuku countered, his voice rising slightly. We are a rebellion. We fight for freedom against the tyranny of the Galactic Empire. He watched their faces, searching for any flicker of recognition. He found none. The names meant nothing to them. This planet, this entire system, was truly uncharted. They were completely isolated from the galactic conflict. Ignorant. And unprepared. An empire? All Might leaned forward, his massive holographic form creating visual static. Young man, this story is quite fantastic. Are you certain you didn't suffer a head injury in the crash? Your ship's design is unknown to us, but it's not unheard of for corporations to develop secret experimental aircraft. My ship is a Corellian G9 rigger, heavily modified for long-range reconnaissance, Izuku stated, the technical details flowing from him instinctively. And I can assure you, my head is clear. The Empire is a galaxy-spanning authoritarian regime led by Emperor Palpatine. They rule through fear, using their vast military to crush any world that defies them. My homeworld was one of those worlds. They took everything from me. The Alliance took me in. I was raised to fight them. His voice cracked on the last part, a sliver of genuine pain cutting through his trained composure. He saw a flicker of something, sympathy, perhaps, in All Might's eyes. Aizawa remained unmoved. A convenient backstory, the tired hero drawled. Orphaned by a cartoonish evil empire. It's a common trope. What was your mission? Why were you being pursued? This was the critical part. He had to make them understand the urgency. I am an intelligence officer. My mission was to deliver a data spike containing Imperial battle plans to Alliance High Command. The plans detailed the Empire's expansion into this region of space, Sector 7G. They are surveying worlds for resources, strategic value, and compliant populations. The vessel that chased me, an Aquitans-class command cruiser called the Steel Talon, has my last known coordinates. They tracked my hyperspace jump. They know I exited the lane somewhere in this system. They will come looking for me. For the data. And when they find your planet, he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Nizu steepled his paws. And what would happen when they find our planet, Mr. Midoriya? They will classify it, Izuku said, his voice low and grim. They will analyze your population, your resources, your defensive capabilities. They'll see your quirks as a threat to be neutralized or a resource to be exploited. Then they will send a fleet. A star destroyer will sit in your orbit, and you will be given two choices: submit to Imperial rule, or be pacified. There is no third option. Aizawa pushed himself off the wall. This is absurd. You're describing an invasion. An alien invasion. Earth has pro-heroes. We have all might. We are not defenseless. Izuku looked at Aizawa, a desperate plea in his eyes. You don't understand. I saw your abilities. They're incredible, beyond anything I've ever seen on a single world. But you're fighting with your fists, with fire and ice. The Empire fights with fleets of starships that can reduce a continent to molten glass from orbit. They have legions of indoctrinated stormtroopers armed with blaster rifles that can punch through solid durasteel. Your greatest hero. He glanced at All Might's hologram. Is a phenomenal powerhouse, but he can't punch a star destroyer. He can't stop a turbo-laser bombardment that will sterilize the planet's surface. The sheer, apocalyptic scale of his description finally seemed to give them pause. The room fell silent again, the weight of his words settling like a shroud. You said you have proof, Nisa said, breaking the quiet. The data spike, I presume? Mr. Aizawa retrieved it. Aizawa produced a metallic cylinder from a pouch on his belt and slid it across the table. It stopped in front of Izuku. It's a dead object. No power source we can detect, no interface ports we recognize. For all we know, it's just a paperweight. It's not, Izuku insisted, picking it up. He turned it over, showing them the contact ridges at the base. It requires a specific reader, a holoterminal with Imperial encryption protocols. The data is protected by a 128-bit slicer-proof code wall. You don't have the technology to access it. How convenient! Aizawa muttered. Frustration boiled in Izuku's chest. They weren't listening. They were filtering his reality through their own, and it wasn't fitting. He had to give them something concrete, something undeniable. His mind raced, seizing on the one thing he could offer. The ship, he said suddenly. The Steel Talon. You think I'm making it up. But I can describe it to you. Every detail. Nisa's ear twitched. Go on. Izuku closed his eyes, accessing the intelligence files he had studied for months. His analyst's mind took over, the muttering starting, soft and rapid fire. Arquitens-class command cruiser. Length, 325 meters. Manufacturer, Quat Drive Yards. It's an older model, but retrofitted for patrol and command duties in undeveloped sectors. It's faster than a star destroyer, more maneuverable. Its primary weakness is its relatively light shielding, particularly around the ventral command bridge and the engine block. Armament consists of 4 quad turbolaser batteries, 2 dorsal, 2 ventral, with an effective range of 75,000 kilometers in atmosphere. They also carry 4 concussion missile tubes, forward-mounted. Excellent for orbital bombardment. Its secondary armament includes, I believe, 10-point defense laser cannons for anti-starfighter screening. It carries a complement of 150 stormtroopers, plus command crew, support staff, and a full squadron of 12 TIE/LN starfighters. The commander of the Steel Talon is Captain Forlag, a ruthless pragmatist from Karita who believes in overwhelming force. He will not hesitate to fire on civilian targets to make a point. He opened his eyes. The room was deathly quiet. Aizawa was staring at him, his cynical mask having slipped just a fraction. All Might's hologram was static-free, his face a grim, thoughtful portrait. Nisa's whiskers were twitching with intense curiosity. The level of detail was staggering. It wasn't the rambling of a lunatic. It was a tactical briefing. The names, the numbers, the specific technical terms, it was too cohesive, too structured to be a simple fabrication. Young man. All Might started, his voice softer now. The conviction in your voice, it is difficult to dismiss. It's a trick, Aizawa insisted, though his tone lacked its earlier certainty. A highly elaborate one. He could have a technopathic or memory fabrication quirk we can't detect. He's feeding us a story designed to cause panic. Nisa tapped a paw on the table, a rhythmic, thoughtful sound. Perhaps. But let us consider the alternative, Mr. Aizawa. What if he is telling the truth? What is the risk of dismissing his warning versus the risk of believing him? If we dismiss him and he is telling the truth, the potential cost is planetary subjugation. The end of our society, as we know it. If we believe him and he is lying, we have wasted some time and resources on a very creative young man. From a purely logical and strategic standpoint, we cannot afford to assume he is lying. The principal's cold, calculating logic was more effective than any emotional appeal. Aizawa fell silent, his jaw tight. He hated it, but he couldn't refute the point. I agree with Principal Nizu. All Might's voice rumbled. When he crashed, his first action, his only action, while he was injured and burning, was to steer his vessel away from the city. I saw the trajectory logs. He saved hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives at great personal risk. That is not the action of a malicious villain. It is the act of a hero. Izuku felt a lump form in his throat. To be called a hero, by this giant of a man, it was a foreign concept. He was a spy. A soldier. He did what was necessary. Heroism was for people like them. Nizu looked at Izuku, his black eyes seeming to pierce right through him. Very well, Mr. Midoriya. We will operate under the conditional assumption that your story is true. For now, you will be granted provisional asylum within UA grounds, but you will be under constant surveillance. You will not be a prisoner, but you will not be free. You will cooperate fully. Your first task is to help us understand the technology you brought with you. He turned to Aizawa. Please escort Mr. Midoriya to Development Studio Gamma. I have already summoned Power Loader and his top student. They will begin their analysis of your ship immediately. Aizawa's expression soured, but he gave a curt nod. Come on, kid. As Izuku stood, his legs feeling unsteady, Nizu offered one final thought. Mr. Midoriya, one last thing. This quirk you mentioned, the explosive one from the young man at the crash site, what was your assessment of it? Izuku paused, his analytical mind kicking back in. Powerful. Unrefined. He relies on instinct and raw force rather than strategy. His movements are telegraphed. A disciplined fighter could exploit his emotional state to create openings. He has incredible potential, but he is his own worst enemy. A faint, genuine smile touched Nizu's lips for the first time. An astute and accurate analysis. Very well done. The walk from the interrogation block to the development studio was a surreal experience. Aizawa led him through pristine, sunlit corridors with impossibly high ceilings and massive windows that looked out over a sprawling campus. He saw students in uniform milling about, laughing, talking, their lives completely untouched by the galactic war that had defined his entire existence. It was like stepping into a dream. These people worried about exams and rivalries, not about imperial blockades or surprise inspections from the ISB. The peace here was so profound it felt fragile, like a delicate glass sculpture. He felt an overwhelming, fierce desire to protect it. They arrived at a massive industrial building that buzzed with the sound of machinery and smelled of hot metal and ozone. A large placard read, UA Development Studio. Aizawa led him inside. The space was a cavernous workshop, a glorious, chaotic mess of workbenches, half-assembled gadgets, blueprints, and sparking power tools. It was an engineer's paradise. In the center of it all, cordoned off by thick yellow lines, were the remains of the Hope's Whisper. Seeing his ship like this, inert and broken under the bright workshop lights, hurt more than he expected. It looked like a dissected animal, its inner workings exposed. Wires and power conduits spilled from gashes in the hull. The hyperdrive motivator, its casing cracked, was visible through a tear in the engine block. A man in a heavy-duty helmet that looked like a construction vehicle's scoop stood with his arms crossed, examining the wreckage. This had to be Power Loader. So this is the kid. Power Loader's voice was a gravelly grumble, muffled by his helmet. Nizu gave me the short version. Aliens. Empire. The whole 9 yards. Sounds like a load of bandipudu, if you asked me. Izuku blinked. You know what a banda is, kid. I've seen every Star Raiders holofilm ever made. Doesn't mean I believe they're real. Power Loader retorted. He gestured at the ship. This thing, though, this is something else. The alloy of the hull is a composite I've never seen. It's light, but the energy dispersal readings are off the charts. And the power core, it's not fission, it's not fusion, it's something else entirely. It's giving off a type of radiation that doesn't even exist on our periodic table. As he spoke, a figure shot out from behind the ship's landing gear, a blur of motion that ended with her face inches from Izuku's. She had wild pink hair styled into what looked like dreadlocks, and her eyes, hidden behind a set of intricate golden goggles, were wide with an almost terrifying intensity. "You're the pilot? You flew this magnificent baby?" she exclaimed, her voice a high-pitched torrent of pure, unadulterated excitement. She grabbed his shoulders, her grip surprisingly strong. "What's its FTL drive classification? Is it a gravitic distortion engine or a temporal displacement model? The energy signature is unlike anything I've ever seen. The way the containment field is warped around the primary motivator suggests it's literally punching a hole in space-time. Is that how it works? Did you build it yourself? Can I take it apart? Please say I can take it apart." Izuku stumbled back, overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught of questions. It's a Class 1.5 hyperdrive. I helped rebuild it, and no, please don't take it apart any more than it already is." The girl's name was Mei Hatsum, Power Loader's top, and most volatile, student. She paid Aizawa and Power Loader no mind, her entire universe now focused on Izuku and his ship. She fired off another 100 questions about the repulsor lifts, the inertial dampeners, and the navicomputer. For the first time since he'd crashed, Izuku felt a spark of something other than fear. He was talking to someone who understood. He answered her questions, his own technical enthusiasm bubbling to the surface. "The navicomputer is fried, unfortunately," he explained, pointing to the cockpit. "A power surge during the jump wiped the primary memory banks. Fried is just a sad word for a puzzle to be solved," Mei declared. She scrambled up the ramp and into the cockpit, her tools already out. Power Loader sighed. "Once she gets started, there's no stopping her." He looked at Izuku, a new level of respect in his eyes. "You know your way around a circuit board, kid. Maybe your story isn't complete nonsense after all." Izuku was about to reply when a shriek of pure, unadulterated ecstasy echoed from the cockpit. It was so loud it made Aizawa flinch. Mei Hatsum came sliding back down the ramp, holding a dislodged component, the hyperdrive regulator, as if it were a holy relic. Her goggles were pushed up onto her forehead, revealing eyes that shone with the light of revelation. "Oh my gosh," she breathed, her voice trembling with awe. She looked from the regulator in her hands to Izuku, her expression one of utter reverence. "The microcircuitry, the energy channeling, this is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." She held it aloft. "This baby," she declared to the workshop at large, "is going to change the world." She then promptly fainted, collapsing in a heap on the floor with a contented smile on her face, still clutching the piece of alien technology. Aizawa stared at the unconscious girl, then at Izuku, then at the wrecked ship. He pinched the bridge of his nose, a deep, weary sigh escaping his lips. His day had started with a simple rescue exercise. It was ending with a potential alien invasion, a crashed starship in his workshop, and one of his colleagues' students passed out from sheer technological euphoria. The threat Izuku spoke of was still an abstract concept, a phantom from another reality. But looking at the impossible machine in front of him, and the undeniable effect it had on their brightest young inventor, Aizawa had to admit one terrifying thing. The evidence was beginning to be very, very real. The bridge of the Arquitans-class command cruiser Steel Talon was a cathedral of cold, brutalist efficiency. Polished black floors reflected the stark, angular lines of the command pits, and the muted glow of 100 tactical displays. There was no extraneous noise, only the low, omnipresent hum of the ship's reactor core, the soft chime of system status updates, and the crisp, precise clicks of officers operating their consoles. The air itself was recycled, sterile, and chilled to a temperature that discouraged comfort and promoted a state of perpetual, low-grade alertness. Through the trio of massive viewports, the blackness of space was absolute, punctured by the distant, uncaring light of unfamiliar stars. Captain Forlag stood on the command walkway, his hands clasped behind his back, his immaculate gray uniform a testament to his rigid adherence to imperial protocol. His face, a mask of weathered lines and stern discipline, was fixed on the planet hanging in the void before them. It was a vibrant jewel of blue, green, and swirling white, a world teeming with an energy that made the long-range sensors spit out readings that were, to his orderly mind, nonsensical. "Report," he commanded, his voice a low baritone that cut cleanly through the bridge's quiet hum. The communications officer, a young, severe-looking woman, swiveled in her chair. "No response from the scout ship, Captain. Its transponder went dead the moment it was forced out of hyperspace. We've triangulated its last known trajectory to the planet's gravity well. Scans confirm a high-energy impact in a heavily forested region on the primary continent. Survivors? Unlikely, sir. The vessel was breaking apart on atmospheric entry. However, there is a 97% probability that the data spike survived the crash." Forlag's jaw tightened. A 97% probability was not a guarantee. That data was critical. Lord Vader himself had taken an interest in the pacification of Sector 7G. Failure to retrieve those plans would have consequences. "And the planet itself?" he asked, turning his gaze back to the swirling orb. "An anomaly, Captain," the science officer interjected, his voice tight with a mixture of confusion and professional curiosity. "Standard Class M atmosphere. Rich in resources, but the bioenergy readings are unprecedented. We're detecting millions of discrete, high-output energy sources emanating from the dominant sentient species. They are chaotic, varied, and potent. We have no classification for this phenomenon." Before Forlag could process this new, inconvenient variable, a change occurred on the bridge. The low hum of the reactor seemed to deepen. The air grew colder, a profound, biting chill that had nothing to do with the life support system. The crew tensed. Postures became rigid. Eyes that had been focused on their screens now darted nervously towards the turbolift at the rear of the bridge. The turbolift doors hissed open, and a figure emerged. He was tall and unnervingly thin, clad in form-fitting black armor that seemed to drink the light around it. A helmet, polished to a mirror sheen, concealed his face, its design a stylized, nightmarish interpretation of a skull. A double-bladed lightsaber hilt was clipped to his belt. He moved with a silent, liquid grace that was utterly at odds with the rigid formality of the naval officers. This was the 12th brother, an inquisitor of the Galactic Empire. Part Jedi hunter, part dark side adept, he was the Emperor's will made manifest, a specter of the new order sent to purge the galaxy of its lingering light. He was not part of the naval chain of command. He existed outside of it, a blade held at its throat. Captain Forlag turned and offered a crisp, formal bow. "Inquisitor. I was not aware you had left your meditation chamber." The Inquisitor's voice, when it came, was a synthesized, chilling monotone, devoid of all human inflection. "Your concern is noted, Captain. I grew tired of your tedious orbital scans. The answers are not out here. They are down there." He glided to the viewport, his featureless helmet reflecting the image of the blue-green world. He stood there for a long moment, utterly still. Forlag could feel the man's focus, a palpable pressure in the air. "The Force," the 12th brother whispered, the vocoder barely catching the sound. "It roars from this world. Not in the clear streams of the Jedi, or the focused depths of the Sith. It is a cacophony, a billion screaming voices, all wielding a sliver of its power, yet deaf to its song. It is beautifully chaotic." Forlag did not understand this mystical talk. He understood fleet formations and orbital mechanics. The Force was a tool for the Emperor and his chosen, a variable he couldn't quantify, and therefore, one he distrusted. "My Lord Inquisitor," Forlag said, choosing his words carefully, "my orders are to retrieve the data spike. Standard protocol suggests a surgical insertion of a stormtrooper recovery team to the crash site. Minimal contact with the local populace until we can ascertain their threat level." The Inquisitor turned his helmeted head slowly, the featureless black mask fixing on the captain. The pressure in the room intensified. "Your protocols are designed for predictable worlds, Captain. This world is unique. Your stormtroopers would be a hammer where a scalpel is required. They would announce our presence to the entire planet before we learned a single one of its secrets." He raised a black-gloved hand and pointed a accusatory finger at the planet. That rebel pilot did not choose this world by accident. I can feel his presence, a small, frantic light, flickering in the sea of noise. But there are other lights. Brighter ones. One, in particular, it burns like a captive sun, an untrained, undisciplined, but monumentally powerful nexus in the Force. The 12th brother's interest was no longer in the data spike. It was in the planet itself. A world of potential Force sensitives, a potential Jedi to be hunted, or a new weapon to be forged for his master. Launch the probe droids, the Inquisitor commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. All of them. Disperse them across the most densely populated continents. I want this world mapped. I want its power catalogued. And I want a small contingent of your most elite scout troopers dispatched to the surface. Not to the crash site. To the population centers. They are to observe. To record. And to engage only if a target of unique interest is identified. Is that understood, Captain? Forlag's lips thinned into a hard line. His authority on his own bridge had just been usurped. But to argue with an Inquisitor was to invite a demonstration of the dark side that he had no desire to witness. It is understood, Inquisitor, he said, the words tasting like ash. Launch the Viper probe droids. And prepare a squad of scout troopers for covert deployment. The 12th brother turned back to the viewport, his black form a silhouette against the vibrant world. Good, Captain. Let us whisper into the void, and see what screams back. The Imperial Viper probe droid descended through the planet's upper atmosphere like a black, metallic teardrop. Its ablative shielding glowed cherry red from the friction of entry before flaking away to reveal the dark, multi-lensed orb beneath. Its programming was simple, efficient, and ruthless. Observe. Record. Analyze. Survive. It deployed its manipulator arms and sensor antennae, its repulsor lift engine engaging with a low, almost subsonic hum. It drifted silently through the clouds, its array of sensors drinking in the world below. Analyzing atmosphere, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, trace gases. Classification breathable. Scanning for energy signatures, multiple high-yield power grids detected. Technology level, PRE hyperdrive, post-industrial. Classification, level 7 civilization, detecting biosignatures, population density high. Ubiquitous, anomalous energy readings emanating from sentient lifeforms. Cross-referencing with Imperial database. No match found. New phenomenon designation, Q-factor. The droid descended into the heart of a sprawling metropolis. Muzutafu. It navigated the concrete canyons, its black shell a stark contrast to the city's vibrant colors and cacophonous energy. It clung to the shadow of a skyscraper, its central red optic lens panning across a bustling shopping district below. The scene was one of overwhelming sensory input. The droid's processors worked furiously to classify the data. Individuals with elastic limbs, individuals generating small flames from their fingertips to light cigarettes, individuals with animal-like mutations. The Q-factor was everywhere, integrated into the very fabric of society. It was mundane. It was normal. The droid's mission parameters shifted. Primary objective: observe and identify applications of Q-factor. Assess potential for weaponization. It focused its audio sensors on a group of teenagers gathered near a fountain. One of them, a boy with hair that seemed to be made of slick, wet seaweed, was gesturing dramatically. "Check this out, Emmy!" he boasted, puffing out his chest. "My control has gotten way better!" He held out his palm, and a small, crackling sphere of golden light fizzled into existence, dancing above his hand. It was no larger than a fist, emitting a gentle warmth and a pleasant, crackling sound. His friends oohed and awed with polite appreciation. It was a simple, harmless display. A party trick. The probe droid's logic, however, processed the event differently. Analysis. Subject generating uncontained, weaponized energy discharge. Energy output, 0.8 kilojoules. Classification, hostile action. Threat level minimal. Protocol, neutralize immediate threat to preserve stealth integrity. Engage. A small panel on the droid's underside slid open, revealing the barrel of a compact blaster cannon. It took aim. There was no malice, no anger. It was the cold, unfeeling execution of a command line. A high-pitched whine cut through the air as the weapon charged. I'm just saying, Ida, a proper hero patrol posture shouldn't make you look like you're about to perform a marching band routine, Ochako Uraraka said, a cheerful bounce in her step. Tenya Ida, walking a precise 2 paces to her left, adjusted his glasses. Uraraka, posture is paramount. It projects confidence and vigilance. A hero must be a pillar of society, both figuratively and literally. Your current slouch suggests casual indifference. He punctuated his statement with a crisp, chopping motion of his hand. Uraraka giggled. Their afternoon patrol was a mandatory part of their hero studies work experience, a routine tour through the bustling Kiashi Ward shopping district. It was mostly uneventful, consisting of giving directions, helping retrieve a cat from a tree, which Uraraka had solved by simply making the cat weightless, and reminding citizens not to use their quirks in ways that obstructed public footpaths. It was peaceful. It was normal. They were passing a large fountain when the sound cut through the air. It was a sound that didn't belong, a high-pitched, electronic whine, followed by a sharp snap hiss. A bolt of brilliant crimson energy, impossibly fast, shot from the shadows of a nearby building. It struck the stone pavement just in front of the teenagers by the fountain, blasting a fist-sized chunk of rock into smoking gravel. Screams erupted. The crowd, which had been a river of casual shoppers a moment before, devolved into a panicked mob. "Villain attack!" someone shrieked. Ida and Uraraka's playful demeanor vanished, replaced instantly by the focused intensity of trained heroes. "Uraraka, crowd control! Get the civilians clear!" Ida commanded, his engines already beginning to vent steam. "Right." Uraraka started waving people back, her voice firm. "Everyone, please evacuate in an orderly fashion. This way." Ida's eyes scanned the area, trying to pinpoint the source of the attack. He saw it then, a dark, spherical object with spindly arms, hovering silently near the rooftop of a department store. It was unlike any villain or support tech he had ever seen. A second crimson bolt shot out, this one aimed at the boy with the seaweed hair, who was frozen in terror. Recipro burst. Ida became a blue and silver blur. He crossed 50 meters in less than a second, grabbing the boy and pulling him behind the relative cover of the fountain's stone base just as the laser bolt seared the air where his head had been. "What is that thing?" the boy stammered, his face pale with shock. "I don't know," Ida admitted, peering over the edge of the fountain. "But its intentions are clearly hostile." The probe droid descended, its single red eye fixing on them. It let out a burst of synthesized, chittering noise, a data stream of tactical analysis converted into sound. It fired again, its aim precise. The bolt slammed into the fountain, sending sprays of water and stone shrapnel into the air. "I can't get a bead on it," Ida grunted, forced to stay behind cover. "It's too high up, and its attacks are too fast. Then we bring it down to us," Uraraka's voice called out. She had cleared the immediate area and was now moving to flank the droid. She slapped her palms on a large, discarded advertising sign made of solid metal. "Release!" The sign, now glowing with a faint pink aura, floated into the air. With a determined yell, Uraraka flung it at the droid like a massive discus. The droid's manipulator arms moved with blinding speed. One of them whipped out, and a small, focused laser beam sliced the sign neatly in two before it could make contact. The two halves clattered uselessly to the ground. "Its defenses are incredible," Uraraka gasped. The droid, having identified Uraraka as the more immediate threat, swiveled and fired at her. She yelped and dove behind a planter, the blaster bolt vaporizing a bonsai tree. They were completely outmatched. This was not a villain they could reason with or intimidate. It was a machine, relentless and lethally precise. Its armor seemed to shrug off Ida's tentative kicks, and its weaponry kept them pinned down. Just as the droid was lining up another shot on Uraraka's position, a new voice sliced through the chaos. "A villain that shoots first and doesn't monologue? How refreshingly rude!" A figure landed between the students and the droid, a gust of wind swirling around him. He was a lean man in a green and white costume with motifs that resembled sickles. This was the pro-hero Kamaitachi, whose quirk allowed him to generate blades of razor-sharp wind. You kids did good holding the line, he said with a confident grin. Now let the pros take it from here. Scything gale, he swung his arms, and two visible blades of compressed air shot towards the droid. The droid twisted in the air, evading the first, but the second struck it squarely on its side. The sound of metal screeching filled the air as the attack carved a deep gash in its armored hull. The droid sparked and wobbled, its repulsor lift engine sputtering. Enraged, or as close to enraged as its programming allowed, the droid unleashed a rapid-fire volley of blaster bolts at Kamaitachi. The hero was fast, creating small gusts of wind to deflect the shots, but one of them grazed his shoulder, earning a sharp hiss of pain. That thing packs a punch, he grunted. Seeing their chance, Ida and Uraraka acted. Now Uraraka! Ida yelled. While the droid was focused on the pro-hero, Uraraka sprinted from her cover. Her target not the droid itself, but the chunks of pavement it had blasted loose earlier. She slapped her hand on the largest piece. As it began to float, Ida was already in motion. Recipro extend! He shouted, using his quirk to deliver a powerful roundhouse kick to the floating piece of concrete, turning it into a high-speed projectile. The makeshift missile, faster than Uraraka could have thrown it, slammed into the droid's already damaged side. The impact was immense. There was a sickening crunch of metal, a shower of blue sparks, and the droid's red eye flickered and died. It tumbled from the sky, crashing onto the pavement with a final, pathetic clang. Silence descended, broken only by the distant wail of sirens. Ida, Uraraka, and Kamaitachi stood over the wreckage, breathing heavily. The battle was over, but the feeling was not one of triumph. It was one of deep, unsettling confusion. What was that? Uraraka whispered, staring at the alien machine. Its design, its weapon, its cold, robotic movements. It was like something out of a science fiction holofilm. Kamaitachi knelt, examining the gash on its side. I have no idea. But I'm damn sure it wasn't made on Earth. The atmosphere in UA's primary analysis lab was thick with a tension that could have been cut with a knife. The remains of the probe droid lay on a large metal table in the center of the room, its internal mechanisms exposed and sparking faintly. Nizu Aizawa and a grim-faced, skeletal All Might stood on one side. On the other stood Izuku Midoriya. Aizawa had just finished debriefing them on the incident, including the eyewitness accounts from Ida, Uraraka, and Kamaitachi. Its durability was beyond anything expected from a machine of its size, Aizawa concluded, his voice flat. And its energy weapon was precise and powerful enough to injure a seasoned pro-hero. The police have no record of any similar technology, domestic or foreign. All Might, in his true form, looked gaunt and worried. To attack civilians without provocation, it is a level of cold malice that is deeply disturbing. It wasn't malice, Izuku said quietly, his voice drawing every eye in the room. He hadn't spoken a word during the entire debriefing, his gaze fixed on the broken machine. It was protocol. He slowly walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the silent lab. He reached the table and gently ran a finger over the droid's scorched hull. There was no fear in his eyes, only a deep, profound sadness, a weary recognition. I told you they would come, he whispered. You know what this is, young Midoriya? All Might asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Izuku nodded grimly. He pointed to the single, shattered optic lens. This is an Imperial Viper probe droid. A standard reconnaissance and infiltration unit used by the Empire. He moved around the table, his hands gesturing to different components as if he were a museum curator explaining a familiar exhibit. This array here, he said, tapping the cluster of broken sensors, is for atmospheric and geological analysis. It would have been cataloging your air quality, your planet's mineral composition, everything. These manipulator arms are for sample collection. And this is a standard issue 11 blaster cannon, compact model. It's programmed with standard threat assessment protocols. It would have registered any public quirk usage as a hostile act and moved to neutralize what it perceived as a threat to its mission. He looked up at them, his green eyes burning with an intensity they had not seen before. This wasn't an attack. This was the Empire dipping its toe in the water. This droid's only purpose was to gather information and send it back to the Steel Talon. Information about your world. About your powers. About your defenses. Aizawa's face was pale. Every bit of skepticism, every lingering doubt, had evaporated, burned away by the hard, undeniable truth lying broken on the table before him. The fantastic story the alien boy had told was no longer a story. It was an intelligence report, and he was staring at the first casualty. Nisa's fur bristled, his usual calm demeanor cracking to reveal the sharp, strategic mind beneath. Did it succeed? Did it transmit its findings? Izuku examined a damaged panel near the droid's main processor. He pried it open with his fingers. The main transmitter is fried. The finishing blow from your students likely caused a power surge that wiped its short-term memory banks and corrupted the data packet before it could establish a successful uplink. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. You got lucky. They know something is here, but they don't know what. For a moment, there was relief. Then, the grim reality crashed back down on them. They will send more, Izuku stated, his voice devoid of hope. They are patient. They will escalate. Scout troopers will be next, then a full garrison. This was just the first whisper. The screaming is yet to come. The room was silent. The threat was no longer a distant starship in a fantastical story. It was here. It had a name. It had a face, a cold, mechanical one. It had bled on their streets and attacked their citizens. Izuku's arrival had not been the beginning of the crisis. It had been the final warning. A warning that, until this moment, they hadn't truly been able to comprehend. Now they did. The Empire was real, and its shadow was falling over their world. The room was the heart of Japan's hero society, a place few outside the highest echelons ever saw. UA's primary strategy chamber was a cavernous amphitheater, its walls lined with massive, dark gray screens currently displaying tactical maps of the country. At the center, arranged in a semicircle, was a heavy, polished durasteel table that Mahatsum had excitedly identified as being salvaged from Izuku's wrecked ship. Seated around it were the giants of their world. Endeavor, the new #1 hero, sat rigid and imposing, his arms crossed over his chest, his signature flames burning at a low, controlled simmer that hinted at the immense power and volcanic temper coiled within him. Hawks, the #2, was perched casually on the back of his chair, his vermilion wings rustling softly, a deceptively easygoing smile on his face that did little to hide the razor-sharp intelligence in his golden eyes. Best Jeanist, ever the picture of pristine control, sat with perfect posture, his denim uniform immaculate. Mirko, the rabbit hero, tapped an impatient foot on the floor, her muscular frame practically vibrating with contained energy. Edgeshot, the stoic ninja hero, was a silent shadow, his presence felt more than seen. The rest of the top 10 were present, either in person or via high-fidelity holographic projection, their expressions a universal mask of grim disbelief. At the head of the table stood Principal Nizu, flanked by a skeletal All Might. And next to them, looking impossibly small and out of place in his simple gray tracksuit, was Izuku Midoriya. The remains of the Viper probe droid lay on a smaller table to the side, a silent, damning piece of evidence. And that, Nizu concluded, his calm voice echoing in the tense silence, is the situation as we understand it. The testimony of our guest, Izuku Midoriya, has been corroborated by this artifact. We are facing an extraterrestrial, hostile power of unknown scale and capability. We have named this threat, per Mr. Midoriya's terminology, the Galactic Empire. A heavy silence followed his words. It was Endeavor who broke it, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that sounded like grinding rocks. This is absurd, he stated, not as a question, but as a declaration. An alien invasion. This is the stuff of cheap fiction. You've brought us all here based on the ravings of a shipwrecked child and one broken machine? A machine that injured a pro-hero and fired on civilians without warning. Hawks countered smoothly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Can't just ignore something like that, Endeavor. Bad for the approval ratings. This is beyond approval ratings, you feathered fool! Endeavor snapped, a lick of flame erupting from his shoulder. This is a matter of planetary security. And our only source of intelligence is him? He gestured dismissively at Izuku. All eyes in the room fell on Izuku. He felt the weight of their scrutiny, a physical pressure. These were legends, beings of immense power and authority, the pillars of their world. And he was nothing, a quirkless spy, an alien refugee. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. All Might placed a reassuring, bony hand on his shoulder. Young Midoriya has proven to be an invaluable asset, All Might said, his voice quiet but firm. His knowledge is our only weapon right now, Niza nodded. Indeed. Which is why we have asked him to provide a proper threat assessment. Mr. Midoriya, if you would, this was it. His briefing to Alliance High Command, repurposed for a new, unprepared audience. He took a deep breath, stepped forward, and activated a holographic projector May had managed to interface with his data spike. A three-dimensional image of a stormtrooper, rendered in stark blue light, materialized in the center of the table. This is an Imperial stormtrooper, Izuku began, his voice shaky at first, but gaining strength as he slipped into the familiar cadence of an intelligence briefing. They are the primary infantry unit of the Empire. They are not an army of individuals. They are a legion of zealots, indoctrinated from birth, fanatically loyal to the Emperor. They do not fear death. They do not accept surrender. They exist only to enforce the Imperial will. He manipulated the display, highlighting the white armor. Their armor is designed for intimidation and environmental sealing, not comprehensive protection. It is resistant to shrapnel and glancing energy weapon impacts, but a direct hit from a standard blaster rifle will penetrate it. Its primary weakness is its limited field of vision from the helmet, which also has notoriously poor sensor feedback. However, a new image appeared, an E-11 blaster rifle. They are all armed with this. The E-11 blaster rifle. It fires cohesive bolts of plasma. It has a higher kinetic impact than your conventional firearms and a significantly higher thermal payload. It will punch through concrete. It will melt steel. It will cauterize wounds as it creates them, a brutally efficient design. Your heroes with hardening or durability quirks may be able to withstand a few hits, but sustained fire will be fatal. For anyone else, a single, well-aimed shot is a kill. The room was silent. Mirko had stopped tapping her foot. Izuku continued, his confidence growing. He brought up image after image, his voice a rapid-fire stream of data. The sleek, terrifying form of a TIE fighter. The lumbering, unstoppable mass of an AT-ST walker. And finally, the image that made the air in the room grow cold. A dagger-shaped behemoth of a starship, bristling with turbolaser batteries, hung in the holographic space above the table. This, Izuku said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, is an Imperial-class Star Destroyer. It is over 1,600 meters long. It carries a crew of over 37,000, a full wing of 72 TIE fighters, and a ground complement of nearly 10,000 stormtroopers, complete with walkers and heavy assault craft. Its turbolaser batteries have enough power to turn the surface of a continent into a sea of glass in a matter of hours. This is what the Empire considers a standard tool of planetary pacification. This is what is coming for you if you cannot stop the Steel Talon from calling for reinforcements. He shut off the projector. The blue light vanished, plunging the room back into its somber, ambient lighting. The heroes stared at the empty space where the image of the Star Destroyer had been, their faces pale. The scale of the threat was incomprehensible. Their quirks, their entire society, their years of fighting villains on the streets, it all seemed so small, so hopelessly insignificant in the face of such overwhelming, industrialized destruction. My God! Best Jeanist murmured, his usual composure completely gone. Endeavor was silent, his flames extinguished, his face a mask of grim fury. He was staring at his own hands, perhaps for the first time truly contemplating a foe that his fire could not reach. Hawks let out a low whistle. Well, that's a bit of a pickle, isn't it? What can we do? It was Ryukyu, the Dragoon hero, who asked the question on everyone's mind. How do we fight this? Izuku looked around the room, at the faces of these powerful, terrified legends. You can't fight their fleet in space, he said bluntly. Not yet. Your only chance is to win the ground war before it begins. You have to locate and neutralize their vanguard force before they can establish a foothold and signal the main fleet. You have to cut the head off the snake. He looked at Nizu. The students, the ones I encountered at the crash site. They are your next generation of heroes, correct? They have immense potential, but they are tactically unprepared for this kind of enemy. They think like heroes, not like soldiers. They announce their presence. They fight one-on-one. A squad of stormtroopers will not fight them honorably. They will use flanking maneuvers, suppressive fire, and coordinated attacks. They will gun your students down from a distance before they can even get close enough to use their quirks. So what are you suggesting? Aizawa asked, his voice low. He was standing in the shadows, having entered during the briefing. I'm suggesting you let me train them, Izuku said, his voice ringing with a newfound conviction. Let me teach them how to fight an enemy that doesn't care about heroic ideals. Let me show them how to survive. Training Ground Gamma was abuzz with a nervous, confused energy. Class 1A stood assembled in their hero costumes, whispering amongst themselves. Aizawa had called them for a surprise combat drill, but the atmosphere was all wrong. Several of the top 10 heroes, including Endeavor and Hawks, were present, observing from a raised platform. It was unheard of. What do you think this is about? Denki Kaminari muttered to Minoru Mineta. Did we do something wrong? It's usually not this serious unless Bakugo blew up another locker room. Hey! I heard that, dunce face! Bakugo snarled. Before an argument could erupt, Aizawa silenced them with a single, sharp glare. Quiet! Today's exercise is a special one. We have a guest instructor who will be teaching you a new form of combat application against a specific type of opponent. He gestured to the entrance of the training ground. Izuku Midoriya walked out, still in his Yui tracksuit. He looked small and unassuming next to the colorfully costumed students. A wave of murmurs went through the class. It's the guy from the crash! Kirishima exclaimed. What's he doing here? Uraraka wondered aloud. Bakugo's eyes narrowed to slits. That quirkless nobody? What the hell is he gonna teach us? Izuku ignored the comments, his face a mask of focus. He walked to the center of the training area, where Meihatsum had set up a line of custom-built robots. They were humanoid in shape, painted white, and armed with modified training rifles that fired low-power, stinging laser bolts. These training droids have been programmed to mimic the combat patterns and accuracy of Imperial stormtroopers, Izuku announced, his voice carrying across the field. Your objective is simple: survive. You must disable the squad of 5 droids before they disable you. You'll be working in teams of 3. First up, Todoroki, Yayorozu, and Ida. The trio stepped forward, looking confident. They were 3 of the most powerful and intelligent students in the class. This should be simple. Begin! Aizawa called out. The 5 droids instantly snapped to attention, their rifles raised. Yayorozu, create a shield! Ida, flank them from the left! Todoroki commanded, stomping his foot. A massive wall of ice erupted from the ground, providing them with cover. It was a sound, standard hero tactic. Against a villain, it would have worked perfectly. Against the droids, it failed in 3 seconds. FCZT. 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 The droids didn't hesitate. They didn't monologue. They opened fire. A coordinated volley of red laser bolts slammed into the ice wall. It didn't break it, but the impacts sent fractures running through the structure. They're shooting through my ice, Todoroki said, shocked. Ida had already taken off, a blur of motion. But the droids' programming was ruthlessly efficient. 2 of them kept firing on the ice wall, providing suppressive fire, while the other 3 instantly swiveled and tracked Ida's movement, leading their target perfectly. A trio of bolts struck him in the leg, causing his engines to sputter and sending him tumbling to the ground. A sensor on his suit blared, signaling a disabling hit. Ida is down! Yayorozu cried out. Before she could create a new weapon, the 2 droids that had been suppressing them shifted their fire. They shot the ice wall not at its center, but at its base, weakening its foundation. With a loud crack, the massive wall groaned and began to topple forward, directly towards Todoroki and Yayorozu. They scrambled out of the way just as it crashed down. They were exposed. All 5 droids now had a clear line of fire. A dozen laser bolts converged on their position. Their suit sensors lit up like festival lanterns. They were out. The entire exercise had lasted less than 30 seconds. A stunned silence fell over the rest of Class 1A. They had just watched 3 of their strongest classmates get utterly and effortlessly dismantled. Izuku walked onto the field. "Your mistakes," he said, his voice sharp and analytical. 1. You announced your strategy aloud, allowing a thinking enemy to anticipate your moves. 2. You relied on a single, static defensive position, which the enemy immediately turned into a trap. 3. You sent your fastest member out alone on a flanking maneuver without any covering fire, making him an easy, isolated target. You fought like heroes. And you lost. He turned to face the rest of the class, his green eyes sweeping over their shocked faces. "Let's try again." Next team. One by one, the teams went up. And one by one they failed. Kirishima's hardening could only take so many hits before the cumulative kinetic force knocked him off his feet. Jiro's sound waves were ineffective against the droid's hardened casings. Tokoimi's dark shadow was a huge target in the brightly lit field. Each time, Izuku would calmly, ruthlessly dissect their failures. Finally, it was the last team's turn: Uraraka, Azuri, and Bakugo. Bakugo was practically steaming with rage. "I'm gonna blow those tin cans to hell!" he roared, launching himself forward without any semblance of a plan. "Bakugo, wait!" Uraraka called, but it was too late. "Predictable," Izuku muttered from the sidelines. The droid's programming locked onto the most aggressive, immediate threat. All 5 rifles swiveled and fired on the airborne Bakugo. He was fast, using his explosions to juke and weave in the air, but he couldn't dodge them all. Several bolts struck him, sending him crashing to the ground, his suit's sensors blaring. He was out in 5 seconds. "You cheating bastards!" he screamed from the ground, smoke rising from his costume. With Bakugo down, the droids advanced on Uraraka and Azuri, their footsteps marching in perfect, unnerving unison. They laid down a spread of suppressive fire, forcing the girls to dive for cover. "They fight like a single unit, Karo," Azuri noted, poking her head out from behind a concrete block. "We can't beat them head-on," Uraraka said, her mind racing. She looked at the battlefield, at the wreckage of Todoroki's ice wall, at the scattered debris. She remembered Izuku's words. "They turned your defense into a trap." An idea sparked in her mind. "Tsuyu-chan, I have a plan. It's crazy, but it might work. I need you to distract them." "You got it, Karo." Azuri's long tongue shot out, wrapping around a high scaffolding and pulling herself out of the droid's line of sight. Uraraka took a deep breath. She started touching the chunks of debris around her, broken pieces of concrete, shards of ice, even the disabled Bakugo, earning a string of furious curses. She made them all weightless. Then, using her quirk on herself, she floated silently upwards, hiding behind a large piece of floating concrete. Azuri, now on the other side of the field, began her distraction, using her camouflage to appear and disappear, drawing the droids' fire and making them split their focus. While they were occupied, Uraraka gathered her floating arsenal above them. It was a makeshift meteor shower of scrap metal, concrete, and one very angry classmate. "Release!" she yelled. Gravity reasserted itself. The storm of debris rained down on the droids. They were programmed for ground-level infantry tactics, not for an orbital bombardment. They were crushed, their metallic bodies crunching under the sudden, overwhelming weight. The last droid standing was flattened by a perfectly aimed, non-explosive Bakugo. Silence. Then, a single, slow clap from the sidelines. Izuku was walking toward them, a small, genuine smile on his face. "Excellent," he said. "You stopped thinking like a hero and started thinking like a soldier. You used the environment. You created a diversion. You attacked from an unexpected angle. That is how you win." Uraraka floated to the ground, flushing with pride. It was the first victory of the day. From the observation deck, Endeavor grunted. "Crude. But effective," Hawks chuckled. "See? The kids are all right. They just needed a new perspective." The training continued for the rest of the afternoon. Izuku drilled them relentlessly. He taught them about kill zones and fatal funnels. He taught them the importance of communication, using hand signals instead of shouting. He taught Todoroki how to use his ice not just as a wall, but to create slick, uneven ground to disrupt an enemy's footing. He taught Jiro how to use her earphone jacks to listen for the specific hum of a blaster pack charging up. He was reprogramming them, overriding their heroic instincts with the cold, hard logic of survival. That evening, the development studio was a hive of activity. Mei, who now followed Izuku around like an over-caffeinated puppy, had made a breakthrough. "I did it! I did it!" she cheered, waving a datapad in the air. "With your decryption keys and my super genius babies, I managed to slice into the main command directory of the data spike." Izuku, power loader, and Nisa crowded around her workbench. On the screen was a stream of text, written in the blocky, angular letters of Orbesh. A translation program was running beside it. "The files are heavily fragmented," Mei explained, tapping furiously at the screen. "But I'm getting partial schematics, troop manifests for the Steel Talon, and wait. What's this?" She isolated a corrupted file and ran a recovery sequence. A blueprint slowly began to resolve on the screen. It was a complex array of antennas and power conduits, centered around a massive Kaiba crystal, a focusing element Izuku recognized with a knot of dread in his stomach. "I know what that is," Izuku said, his voice grim. "It's a long-range hyperspace beacon. It's designed to punch a signal through unsurveyed space, straight to the core worlds. It's a direct line to the Imperial fleet. According to these fragments," Nisa said, his eyes narrowed as he read the translated text. "The Vanguard Force has been ordered to construct this device as their top priority. Its activation will signal the main invasion fleet that this world is ripe for harvest. The pieces were clicking into place. The probe droid was just the first step. The next would be a small, elite force to secure a location and build this beacon. If they succeeded, Earth was doomed. "We have their objective," Izuku said, his mind already shifting into tactical mode. "Now we just need to find them before they can complete it." As he spoke, another student entered the workshop, looking for Mei to repair a piece of his hero costume. It was Katsuki Bakugo. He stopped short when he saw Izuku, a sneer immediately forming on his face. "Still here, space nerd?" he grunted. Izuku ignored him, his focus entirely on the datapad. Bakugo bristled at being ignored. He stomped over, looking over Izuku's shoulder at the schematics. "What's that junk?" "It's the weapon the enemy is building to call their friends and destroy your planet," Izuku replied absently, cross-referencing the beacon's power requirements with the ship's manifest. The casual, matter-of-fact way he said it seemed to knock Bakugo off balance. He fell silent, just watching. He saw the intensity in Izuku's eyes, the way his fingers flew across the datapad, the constant stream of muttered analysis pouring from his lips. He was seeing the real Izuku Midoriya for the first time, not a quirkless victim, but a dedicated, hyper-focused intelligence officer. Finally Bakugo spoke, his voice unusually subdued. "That move, in the forest. When you dodged my right hook. You didn't use a quirk." Izuku looked up, surprised by the question. "No. It's a standard CQC disarm. It redirects an opponent's momentum." "Show me," Bakugo demanded. It wasn't a challenge. It was a genuine, grudging request for knowledge. Izuku blinked. He looked at Bakugo, at the burning frustration and nascent curiosity in his eyes. He saw a warrior who had just realized the limits of his own power. "All right," Izuku said. He stood up and adopted a relaxed combat stance. "Come on. I'll show you." In the chaotic, sparking heart of the development studio, surrounded by alien technology and the schematics for their own potential doom, an unlikely and unspoken truce was formed. The explosive prodigy and the quirkless spy began to spar, one learning the brutal efficiency of technique, the other gaining his first, true, grudging ally on this strange new world. The alliance was no longer just between heroes and a refugee. It was starting to forge itself in the hearts of the next generation. Patience was a virtue for scholars and farmers. For the 12th brother, it was a festering poison. He stood within the sterile confines of his personal meditation chamber aboard the Steel Talon, a circular room of polished obsidian that reflected nothing. He was unhelmed, his face a canvas of pale, scarred flesh, his eyes the burning yellow-orange of a dying star. The cybernetic respirator implanted in his throat clicked with each slow, deliberate breath, a constant, mechanical reminder of a past failure that had cost him his voice and nearly his life. For 3 standard planetary rotations he had waited. He had watched Captain Forlag's methodical, by-the-book reconnaissance proceed at a pace that could only be described as glacial. The probe droids had been launched. Several had been lost, their signals abruptly terminating in bursts of localized energy that spoke of violent destruction. The few that had returned brought fragmented, chaotic data, images of beings who could conjure fire and ice, who could move with impossible speed, who commanded the very elements. The force sensitives on this world were not hiding in dusty temples or marshy swamps. They were celebrities. They were soldiers. They were everywhere. The sheer, untamed power of the planet was an intoxicating symphony to his senses, a siren's call that made the disciplined confines of the starship feel like a cage. Captain Forlag, in his infinite naval wisdom, saw this data as a reason for caution. He spoke of staggered deployments, of establishing a fortified beachhead, of overwhelming force. The 12th brother saw it as a reason for haste. A garden so ripe with power could not be left untended. It needed a firm, guiding hand. A scythe. Enough, he rasped, the vocoder in his throat turning the single word into a harsh, metallic growl. He strode from the chamber, his black armor and robes flowing around him like a shroud of living shadow. The naval ratings in the corridor flattened themselves against the walls, their faces a mixture of fear and awe. He ignored them. They were cogs in a machine. He was the machine's purpose. On the bridge, he found Captain Forlag overseeing the deployment of a scout trooper squad via hologram. The captain's back was rigid with disapproval. Inquisitor, Forlag said, his voice tight. I must again register my objection to this deployment. We are sending a single squad into a city of millions of these superpowered individuals. It is a tactical folly. Your concern for your men is touching, Captain, the 12th brother's vocoder hissed. But their purpose is not to conquer. It is to draw a map for me. They are the hounds. I am the hunter. He pointed a black-gloved finger at the viewport, at the swirling blue-green world. That light I sensed, the one that burns like a sun, it is there. In the largest of the population centers, I will find its source myself. Prepare my ship. Forlag's face hardened. Your ship? My lord, landing an advanced starfighter in the middle of a pre-hyperspace civilization is a catastrophic breach of the first contact protocol. The 12th brother moved, not with speed, but with a terrifying, inexorable grace. He closed the distance between them in 3 silent strides. He did not touch the captain, but Forlag felt a sudden, crushing pressure around his throat. His breath hitched. His eyes bulged. Invisible fingers of pure, malevolent energy were squeezing the life from him. I am the protocol now, Captain, the Inquisitor rasped, his helmeted face inches from Forlag's. You will do as you are commanded, or I will find a more compliant officer to take your place. He released the force choke. Forlag collapsed against the console, gasping for air, his face purple. The rest of the bridge crew stared resolutely at their screens, pretending not to have seen a thing. Prepare my ship, Forlag choked out, the words laced with a new and profound understanding of his place in the Imperial hierarchy. Deep within the hangar bay of the steel talon, the ramp of a TIE/V1 advanced prototype hissed open. This was the Scythe, the 12th brother's personal vessel. It was a predator's ship, all sharp angles and dark metal, its wings bent like a bird of prey in a dive. Its engines glowed with a malevolent red light. The Inquisitor settled into the pilot's seat, the cockpit closing around him like a coffin. With a flick of a switch, the ship came to life. As it lifted from the deck and shot out of the hangar bay, its engines screaming into the void, the 12th brother closed his eyes and reached out with the force. He let go of the ship, of the stars, of the cold vacuum of space. He focused on the planet below, not on its physical form, but on its energy, its life. The cacophony was still there, a billion tiny sparks of power. But he pushed past it, searching, hunting for the beacon that had called to him, and then he found it. It was immense. A blinding bonfire of light in the dark sea of the Force. It was raw, untamed, and radiated an aura of overwhelming goodness that was physically nauseating to him. It felt like standing too close to a sun, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his days in the Jedi Temple, before the purge, before his transformation. A Jedi Master, he thought, a thrill of cold, predatory excitement running through him. A powerful one. He has hidden himself and his world from the galaxy, but his power is a lighthouse that he cannot extinguish. But there was something else. Another light. It was small, almost insignificant compared to the first, but it was intensely focused. It felt familiar. It flickered with desperation, with analytical thought, with a will to survive that was as sharp and pointed as a needle. It was the same light he had sensed in the fleeing rebel pilot. So, the rat survived the crash, the 12th brother mused. And he has run straight to the Jedi for protection. The sides sliced through the upper atmosphere, its stealth systems masking its energy signature and cloaking its hull in a shimmering field that bent the light around it. To anyone on the ground, it was nothing more than a momentary distortion in the clouds. He had his targets. Now, the hunt could truly begin. Muzidifa was a city of perpetual motion, a living, breathing organism of commerce, traffic, and 24-hour news cycles. It was also a city of casual miracles. A woman with butterfly wings flew past a skyscraper, delivering a package. A construction worker with 4 powerful arms effortlessly lifted a steel girder into place. The extraordinary was, for the most part, completely ordinary. The 12th brother landed his tie advanced in the cavernous, echoing shell of an abandoned industrial complex in the city's port district. The area was a graveyard of rusted metal and crumbling concrete, a forgotten relic of a bygone economic era. It was perfect. The ambient energy from the old power conduits and the thick, lead-lined walls would help mask his own dark side signature from anyone with the senses to detect it. He strode from his ship, the synthesized hiss of his respirator the only sound in the cavernous space. The scout troopers 4 lag had dispatched were already there, kneeling in perfect formation. They had done their work well, establishing a perimeter and setting up the preliminary framework for the long-range beacon. Report, the Inquisitor commanded. The squad sergeant, his armor scuffed and camouflaged for an urban environment, rose to his feet. My lord, we have established a secure base of operations. We have begun assembly of the beacon as ordered. The local population is chaotic, but their security forces are unsophisticated. They rely on individuals with anomalous abilities, heroes, they call them. Their tactics are disorganized and theatrical. Show me, the Inquisitor ordered. The sergeant activated a holographic projector on his wrist gauntlet. A grainy, zoomed-in image flickered to life. It showed a pro-hero, a man in a garish yellow costume, engaged in a battle with a low-level villain who could turn his limbs into sludge. The hero, whose name the data slate identified as Fat Gum, was absorbing the villain's blows into his massive, fatty body before expelling the kinetic energy in a single, powerful punch. The 12th brother watched, his helmeted head tilted in analytical curiosity. His body composition is not entirely biological, the Inquisitor observed. He is converting mass into energy absorption and redirection. A crude but effective application of the Force. A living shield. He swiped his hand, and the image changed. A new hero, a woman with long, green hair that she could manipulate like prehensile vines, was subduing a group of bank robbers. Telekinesis, localized to her own keratinous growths. He mused. Limited. Unrefined. But the potential is significant. He had seen enough. The heroes of this world were powerful, but they were also complacent. They fought a predictable, ritualized form of combat against equally predictable foes. They had never faced a true predator. They had never known real fear. It was time to give them a lesson. The heroes, he said, the vocoder dripping with contempt. They patrol the city, yes? Constantly, my lord, the sergeant confirmed. Their patrol routes are public knowledge, mapped and scheduled. The Inquisitor's synthesized voice was laced with a sound that might have been amusement. How wonderfully naive! They announced their own vulnerabilities. He turned and began to walk towards the exit of the warehouse. Sergeant, continue your work on the beacon. I am going for a walk. I wish to test the local defenses, personally. The night in the Sumida ward was cool and quiet. The neon signs of the entertainment district painted the wet streets in shimmering hues of pink and blue. It was the kind of peaceful patrol that pro-hero Ryudo Hydra Guzan lived for. His quirk, which allowed him to sprout multiple, serpentine dragon heads from his back, each capable of breathing a different elemental substance, fire, ice, acid, was far more suited for large-scale disaster relief than street-level crime. Most nights, he simply acted as a visible, reassuring deterrent. He was passing a dark, narrow alleyway when he heard it. A faint, scuttling sound, like claws on concrete. He paused, his main head turning towards the sound, his secondary head swiveling to cover his flanks. "Hello?" he called out, his voice professional and firm. "Is anyone there? If you're in trouble, come out. I'm a pro-hero." There was no response. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold ran down his spine. The alley was a pit of absolute darkness, untouched by the city's neon glow. He took a hesitant step forward, one of his dragon heads letting out a soft puff of flame to illuminate the space. The alley was empty. A dead end. Just overflowing trash cans and slick, grimy brick walls. He relaxed slightly. Probably just a stray cat. As he turned to leave, a voice whispered from the darkness behind him. It was a cold, synthesized sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "A hero!" Hydra spun around, all 5 of his heads snapping to attention, his body dropping into a combat stance. The alley was still empty. "Who's there? Show yourself!" he demanded, his heart hammering in his chest. "You project power," the voice continued, a disembodied, mocking whisper. "But all I sense is fear. You are an animal, lashing out with borrowed strength you do not understand." A sudden, immense pressure clamped down on him. It was as if the gravity in the alley had multiplied by 100. His knees buckled, and he dropped to the ground with a grunt of pain. His dragon heads writhed, trying to pinpoint the source of the attack, but there was nothing to see. It was an invisible, crushing force. What is this?" he gasped, struggling against the unseen weight. A figure stepped out of the deepest shadows. It was a man, tall and thin, clad in night-black armor, his face concealed by a terrifying, skull-like helmet. The air around him was freezing cold. He didn't walk so much as glide over the pavement, his movements utterly silent. Hydra struggled to act. He forced one of his heads to spew a torrent of corrosive acid at the figure. The black-armored man simply raised a hand, palm outward. The stream of acid stopped dead in midair, a foot from his fingers. It hovered there, sizzling and contorting, held in place by the same invisible force that was crushing the hero to the ground. With a casual flick of his wrist, the Inquisitor sent the acid splashing against the brick wall, where it ate through the mortar with a furious hiss. "Crude," the Inquisitor's vocoder rasped. "Disgusting." With his free hand, the 12th brother reached for his belt. There was a sharp, metallic snap, and then a sound that would haunt Hydra's nightmares for the rest of his life. A low, hungry hum that seemed to vibrate in his very soul, followed by the ignition of a blade of pure, crimson energy. A second blade erupted from the other end of the hilt, and the Inquisitor gave it a flick of his wrist. The double-bladed lightsaber began to spin, the red blades blurring into a terrifying pinwheel of destructive light. Hydra's training, his years of experience, all of it screamed at him to run, to escape. But he was pinned, helpless. The figure advanced, the spinning red blades casting a demonic glow on the alley walls. "Your power is an anomaly," the Inquisitor said, his voice a cold, analytical monotone as he loomed over the fallen hero. "Anomalies must be studied. Then they must be corrected." The spinning lightsaber descended. Hydra screamed. The news hit you the next morning like a physical blow. It wasn't on the public channels. The Hero Public Safety Commission had moved quickly to contain the story, but a direct, encrypted report was sent to Nizu. Izuku was in the school's massive library, poring over a datapad containing the basics of Earth's history and physics, when Aizawa found him. The underground hero's face was grimmer than usual, his eyes dark with a weariness that went beyond simple lack of sleep. "We need you in the infirmary," Aizawa said, his voice low and tight. Now, the infirmary was a flurry of controlled chaos. Several of UA's top faculty, including All Might and Recovery Girl, were gathered around a single bed. The hero in the bed was barely recognizable. It was Hydra, his powerful form diminished, his body covered in strange, cauterized wounds. He was unconscious, hooked up to a dozen different monitors that beeped and whirred with alarming data. "What happened?" Izuku asked, his stomach twisting into a knot of dread. "He was found on patrol an hour ago," Recovery Girl explained, her usual chipper demeanor gone. "He's in critical condition. His injuries are bizarre. They're not cuts or stab wounds, they're more like surgical burns, incredibly deep and precise. And there are signs of massive internal bruising, as if he was crushed by an immense, uniform pressure. His quirk is completely unresponsive. It's like it's been terrified into dormancy." Izuku moved closer to the bed, his analytical gaze sweeping over the wounds. He saw the clean, cauterized edges of the burns, the precise angles. He saw the sheer terror that was still etched on the hero's unconscious face. He had seen injuries like this before, in Alliance autopsy reports of agents who had unfortunate encounters with the Empire's dark side users. He knew exactly what this was. "It was a lightsaber," Izuku whispered, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. All Might turned to him, his skeletal face etched with concern. "A what, my boy? A lightsaber?" Izuku repeated, his voice louder this time, filled with a dawning horror. "The weapon of the Jedi, and the Sith. A blade of pure plasma, held in a magnetic containment field. It can cut through almost anything. The crushing feeling, that's the Force. He used it to hold him in place, to torture him." He backed away from the bed, a cold, familiar fear gripping him. A fear he hadn't felt since his homeworld fell. He looked at the concerned faces of the heroes, at their powerful, capable forms, and he knew that they were completely, utterly unprepared for what was happening. "The Empire doesn't just have soldiers and ships," Izuku said, his voice trembling slightly. "They have monsters. Force wielders who fell to the dark side. They call themselves the Inquisitorius. They were once Jedi, but now they hunt anyone with a connection to the Force. They are the Emperor's personal Jedi hunters." Aizawa's eyes widened in dawning comprehension. "The energy you described, the Force, you think he's here because he sensed our quirks? He wouldn't know what a quirk is," Izuku explained, his mind racing. "He would feel the power emanating from this world, from all of you, and he would make one assumption, that this is a planet of hidden Jedi, a nest that needs to be purged. He isn't here for the data spike anymore. He's not here for resources. He's here to hunt. He attacked this hero as a test. To see what you were capable of. To learn." A heavy, dreadful silence fell over the room. The abstract threat of a distant fleet had just become terrifyingly personal. It now had a face, a faceless, helmeted one. It had a weapon, and it was walking their streets. "He left no witnesses," Aizawa said, his voice grim. "The attack was surgical. Terrifying. He wanted to send a message." "No," Izuku corrected, his eyes wide with the horrible realization. "This wasn't the message. This was the opening statement. He was dissecting a specimen. He's learning how your quirks work. He's analyzing your weaknesses. And when he's ready, he will go after the strongest one among you to make his point." All of their eyes, as one, turned to All Might. The symbol of peace, the pillar of their society, the brightest light on the planet, and the single greatest target for a monster that hunted the light. The hunt had begun, and the Inquisitor's chosen prey was the most powerful hero on Earth.